The 3 o'clock's also at a different time. Okay. Thank you, everyone. Welcome to the Ordinary Council meeting of Wyndham City Council this Tuesday, the 2nd of May 2017. In the spirit of reconciliation, before we begin this meeting, I acknowledge the peoples of the Kulin Nation as the traditional owners of the land on which Wyndham is being built. We pay our respects to their elders, past and present. Please stand for the opening prayer. We pray for guidance in the Council's decision-making to achieve the best outcome for the people of Wyndham. Please be seated. I would like to welcome members of the gallery, the press, councillors and staff here for tonight for the Ordinary Council meeting. Some of you may have seen the notices in the foyer, but for those of you who didn't, I would like to make you aware of the following. This meeting is being recorded and live streamed on the internet. The recording will be archived and made available on Council's website. Whilst all care has been taken to ensure that your privacy is maintained, please be aware that your presence may be recorded. Madam CEO, Acting CEO, any apologies and requests for leave of absence?
No, there isn't.
Thank you. We'll move on to item 3. Declaration by councillors of disclosure of conflict of interest, conflicting personal interest in any item of the agenda. Councillor Marcus.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. As listed in the agenda, I have 7 conflicts of interest listed under 6.5.1. These are all to do with the Werribee CBD. I have a commercial building and I also live in the Werribee CBD, so this is why I have declared a conflict of interest.
Thank you, Councillor Marcus. Any others? Councillor McElhaney.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Item 6.3.1, Wyndham's responsible gaming strategy. A family member is employed in one of the 13 gaming venues. And item 6.5.1, capital works items, there's 3 items there: Armstrong Road, greening the pipeline and the leachate management structure. And my conflict is due to being a director of City West Water.
Thank you, Councillor McElhaney. Councillors, are there any more? If not, we shall carry on. Item 4, confirmation of minutes of previous meeting. Do we have a mover, councillors? Councillor Maynard, a seconder. Councillor Gibbons. Councillors, any discussion on the minutes from the previous meeting? If not, I shall put the motion. All those in favour? It's carried. Thank you. Any deputations and presentations, Madam CEO?
No, there are none, Mr Mayor.
Thank you. I should have mentioned earlier, our CEO, Kelly Grigsby, is in Canberra. She should be on her way home or by now. And we have Jenny McMahon as the acting CEO tonight. I won't go through the acting bit, so I'll just refer to you as the Madam CEO. Thank you, Jenny. Before we go into councillors, to officers' reports, I would like to make a comment. And it is with a bit of sadness that I make this comment. I would like to acknowledge that tonight is the last council meeting for our Director of City Transformation, Steve Lambert, which is over there. Don't look at me, look at Steve Lambert. Okay. Tomorrow is Steve's last day with us before moving on to greener pastures. On behalf of councils past and present, I would like to acknowledge Steve's contribution over the past 6 years and thank him for his service to the community. Steve, I speak for all councillors in wishing you well. Your role in the executive management team has been invaluable, and we thank you for all the work that you've done. And even though most of us have only worked with you for the last 6 months, your professionalism is noted. And I'd like to say thank you for your efforts, and invite you back for an official or semi-official farewell in the councillors' lounge afterwards, if you could, if Kevin. Thank you. Officers' reports. Madam CEO, any petitions on item 6.1?
No, there are. Sorry, there are none, Mr. Mayor.
Okay, thank you. 6.2, strategic reports. Councillors, 6.2.1, Global Covenant of Mayors for Climate and Energy. The recommendation is on page 9. Do we have a mover for that, please? Councillor Khan. Do we have a seconder? Councillor Villagonzalo. Councillors, any discussion? If not, I shall put the motion. Oh, yes, discussion. Thank you, Councillor Marcus.
Seeing this belongs to my portfolio. Yep. I'd just like to say that at a local level, Wyndham is already active when it comes to reducing our corporate emissions. Despite being a growth council, we have an ambitious 2040 net zero emissions target and a 12% reduction target by 2020. So we remain on track for these targets through our extensive capital programs, such as our large-scale solar rollout, energy storage trials, bulk changeover of our street lighting, and projects which already compare strongly at a national level. The linking of Wyndham's work to international efforts will also enhance benchmarking opportunities and allow us to compare and improve on our existing climate-related actions and targets. And I think it's important that we do join with the mayors, because I think more and more people are very concerned with what's happening in the global climate. So I'm happy to support this motion before us tonight.
Thank you, Councillor Marcus. Any other discussion, councillors? Councillor McElhaney.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. A commitment to the covenant makes absolute sense and gives local governments the ability to demonstrate on a collective basis on a global stage and to share progress through consistent public reporting. It demonstrates a true commitment by the city to want to lead in this space, a city that is resilient and open to change and being proactive. We are already demonstrating being active in reducing our corporate emissions, demonstrated recently through our State of Environment report, through large-scale solar panels, energy storage trials, and the bulk changeover of the street lighting, and including the waste, viewing our waste as a resource to be recovered, reused, and recycled. I'd just like to mention in one of the reports, in July 2016, nearly 12,000 households in Werribee and Hoppers had the highest rate of solar panels in Victoria. So we are there. We can't forget some of the big projects that we've had in this city. Greening of the West, we saw over 35,000 trees being planted in our council, and only last week, and we launched greening of the pipeline. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor McElhaney. Any other comments, councillors? Councillor Hooper.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Although I support the environmental action and I will be supporting this motion, I request that if there is any marginal impost imposed on the Wyndham City Council, that this recommendation is brought back to the chamber for review.
Thank you. Councillor Khan.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'd like to mention that the Wyndham City Council is a member of WIGA, which is the Western Alliance of the Greenhouse Action. And this is a partnership with 8 councils. And last year we had last year we hosted a seminar, which is an encore. And Wyndham's was the leading council, which has demonstrated how we reduces our emission in the area, and also how we're working in partnership with local businesses, how assisting them. So it's like to mention that, Wyndham City Council is a leading out of the 8 councils, and we've been a champion in the area. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Any other comment, councillors? If not, I shall put the motion. All those in favour? Against? It's carried. Councillors, the next item is item 6.3.1, the Wyndham Responsible Gaming Strategy. Gambling strategy. That's all right. There's an L missing on my page here. Yes, and we do have a conflict. Thank you, Councillor McAloney. Councillors, I'm seeking a mover and a seconder and a nomination for the chair of the Responsible Gambling Reference Group. Councillor Maynard, moving.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. In moving the motion, I'd also like to nominate Councillor Josh Gilligan to fill that position.
Councillor Gilligan, are you happy to do so?
I accept, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you very much. And a seconder, please. Councillor Khan, thank you. Councillors, any discussion? Councillor Gilligan.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor, and thank you to Councillor Maynard for nominating me for this particular position. I think this is a fantastic motion here today to talk about some of the substantive impacts that we need to make within problem gambling. And so developing a strategy over the next 4 years and integrating agencies here in Wyndham will be very, very important in addressing what is a huge issue in terms of costs bottom line. $95 million was ripped out of the pockets of families and individuals in terms of player losses last financial year. It was significantly higher than Melbourne's average, and it was significantly more substantive over a 12-month period. The other important part of this motion relates to the Alliance for Gambling Reform. And this council is taking significant steps in that area, not just to have a conversation about gambling as a municipality, but in my role as an MAV representative, also discussing this on a regional based issue. Having 6 councils around the table in the Western region to talk about problem gambling is a substantive step in relation to this space. We need to work collectively. We need to make sure that we invest in this space over the next 4 years and that we reduce the overall losses that occur not just in this municipality but in the Western region. By having a collaborative approach with as many Western councils as possible, we take the fight to the state and federal levels around what we can do to make sure we address this issue. And I would note that it's obviously speculative at the moment, but if the federal government do look to include in their GST redistributions gambling revenues, there is no doubt the Victorian government will hear very clearly the importance of reducing revenue from poker machines in terms of player losses and also problem gambling when it comes to the online sphere. We must not obviously ignore the fact that future generations are looking at problem gambling in an online sense as opposed to poker machines. So all of this will be considered and looked at through our responsible gambling strategy. It is a huge step forward and I commend council officers and the work that has been done in this space. And thank you for the nomination.
Thank you. Any other comments, councillors? If not, I shall put the... Councillor Marcus.
Yeah, I'd like to talk a little bit about gambling here in our city. When it first came in, it was for the business people, it was a great loss to our economy, but we worked with it. But I think what you've outlined here tonight, that's outlined in here, but I'd just like to add that, and this has come from the Alliance for Gambling Reform, only 2.5 cents for every dollar lost in Victorian pokies is given back by pokie clubs to the community in forms of gifts. Now, when we fought, when this council agreed to put poker machines into Centenary Hall, which is the cultural centre, it cost the Chamber of Commerce and Barryman $100,000, but we fought it and we won. So I really hope that this council is serious in going forward and trying to help the people that might have, but in those days it was 10%. 3% to the government, 4% to the clubs and 3% to other things. Now, this is very concerning is what I think. There is no reason why clubs should get this tax break for providing such a small community benefit. If the tax break was abolished, that's $75 million that could be spent building entertainment and cultural infrastructure, particularly in areas where pokies are sometimes held up as one of the very few entertainments. We all know how dangerous pokie use and gambling is. The harms associated with gambling include not only financial disaster, bankruptcy and loss of assets, but also divorce, separation and its harmful impacts on children, family violence, mental and physically ill health, crime, drug and alcohol abuse and self-harm. So I am really pleased to support this because I've seen over the years that I've been in business in this city what it has done, and you know, to think that we worked hard to stop the poker machine going into what was Centenary Hall, and this is what we have to do. We have to be really, really serious about putting forward a very good policy, because I don't want another policy and we do nothing about it. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Marcus. Councillors, any other comments? Councillor Khan.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. In 2012, Council adopted the Wyndham Responsible Gambling Strategy, which is obviously now due for review, and that's what we're now putting forward to the people to make comment and see what they can suggest. Now, this policy will have social implications, obviously. The data shows that EGM, electronic gaming machines, is actually those people who are using that habits, the primary source of gambling. So it's about 75 to 80% people are actually using the gambling machine. So it's important now we review this policy and see that, you know, how we can actually make a impact in people's life and how we can actually do something about it. And I think a number of partnerships have been created, and now that the resident can, you know, come forward, the community groups and agencies, to educate people the gambling, if they do, they have to involve responsible gambling, not just putting their lives and the savings of the family. And as my colleague Heather Marcus have said, that, you know, there has been a adverse impact of this gambling in Wyndham, and my colleague Josh Gilligan mentioned that it's $95 million out of the pocket, which is a lot of money. Now we know that now the Wyndham City Council is being quite heavy on the gambling compared to the western suburbs or the other council. So this is a really genuine issue. I'm glad to see that motion come forward, and now we can seek input from the public and see what we can do to deal with the problem. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Khan. Councillors, any other comments? If not, I'll put the motion. All those in favour? Against? It's carried. If we could get Councillor McElhaney back in the chamber, please. And it's just come to my attention that past Councillor and Mayor John Menegazzo is in the chamber. So welcome, John. Don't put your hand up when we ask for the vote. Old habits die hard, I'll tell you. Councillors, we're into item 6.4. 6.4.1. Planning permit application WIP 9169/16, which is a request for a construction of 5 double-storey dwellings with associated car parking and landscaping in accordance with the endorsed plans at 1 Devlin Drive, Hoppers Crossing. Do we have a mover of that motion? Councillor Maynard. Seconder, Councillor Hooper. Councillors, discussion. Councillor Carr.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Look, this has been recommended for refusal, and I know why it has been, because we believe that it does not meet the number of the given clauses compared to the car parking and rubbish and other. There has been presentation done in the past, so I am seeing that this kind of application is coming more, but I think what can be done, the people applying for the 5 double-storey dwelling in the small area, I have concern now. People have to think about the neighbourhood character when they apply, because that could save a lot of their hassles and their money and not get disappointed because we're now refusing this. The potential threat is they might go to weekend and they might, you know, debate, and it will cost the time and energy and money for the council officers. And where we saw that, you know, council's always been for being very good, engaging before you lodge an application. They can understand what is the area looks like, what is the neighbourhood area looks like. Now, recently I've seen that now there's so many applications coming for planning, and it has been a lot of increase, especially in Hopper Crossing. And I know that now, yesterday I wrote an article in The Age. The Hopper Crossing has been hot in a market, and people are actually rushing and trying to grab a land and try to put too many dwelling. We love and we see that builders come and make a contribution to the local economy, but I think not the cost of the neighbourhood character. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Khan. Any other comments, councillors? Councillor McAloney.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'll be supporting the recommendation. As the report says, the proposal doesn't support any of the relevant aspects of the state planning policy framework on urban design, neighbourhood character, or the local policy framework. However, I'd just like to note on page 25, I believe that the report states that it's not close to or walking distance to significant transport infrastructure, and I would say that is incorrect. It's not far from a bus stop. So, thank you.
Okay. Any other comments, councillors? If not, I'll put the motion. All those in favour? Against? It's carried. Councillors, the next item is 6.4.2, planning permit application, WIP 976417. Construction of 6 dwellings at 11 Winarka Drive, Hoppers Crossing. The recommendations on page 48 to 50. Do we have a mover? Councillor Khan, seconder Councillor Shaw. Yes. Councillors, any discussion? Councillor Khan.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Look, again, this is the same series of applications coming to the council where we have seen that, we pushed too much. There's now 6 now rather than 5 now. So there's a number of concerns we have before we actually look at these applications, because we, as previously I mentioned, that neighbourhood character is need to be maintained, and we've seen that recently there's a lot of activities happening in Hopper Crossing. I think we need to maintain the neighbourhood character and also the surrounding. If we push too many dwellings, it's just not going to help the neighbourhood character, but also is going to create, now particularly that application we have been in planning a review when planning was given to these people, and they were doing presentation. Now we see that there has been issues where the pickup in the morning, especially with the garbage and things like that, is going to be very difficult now. They haven't had answers how they will be doing it and reversing the trucks, but also though it creates a lot of traffic congestion on that in front of the dwelling, because we're putting 6 dwelling. I wish they could have carefully have spoken or have consulted a council where we could have given them a permit which is reasonably required in neighbourhood character, and rather than avoiding and refusing, and that risk again going a week at. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Shaw.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm speaking in favour of the recommendation tonight to refuse to issue a permit for similar reasons I've spoken against similar project proposals over the last few months. I strongly agree with the assessment that the scale of the development, attached nature of dwellings and disruption to backyard scape does not respect the existing or preferred neighbourhood character. I would go further to say that the impact on the nearby neighbours and on the predominant neighbourhood character of the surrounding area are not reasonable by any measure. While the officer's report and recommendation includes a large number of areas of non-compliance and concern, tonight I want to talk about another issue that is of increasing concern to me, and this is the over-reliance, in my view, on tandem parking and the related impacts on gardens and access to and from dwellings and the property. I will be speaking with officers and councillors more about this concern and what we might be able to do to reduce reliance on tandem parking, while acknowledging the limitations and opportunities we have through our local policy planning framework, the state planning policy framework, and council's neighbourhood character and housing strategy. But back to other concerns I have in relation to the specific application. Mr. Mayor, I think one image included in the agenda speaks volumes about this application. The map of recent applications and a VCAT decision on page 53 of the agenda does give me some hope that VCAT would uphold Council's decision to reject this application on the basis that it does not respect the garden court for character type it is graded as. Other images on pages 72 to 73 also clearly show how the proposal does not fit within the spacious garden character of the surrounding area. As I said on another application in early March, just because you have a larger site does not mean you have free rein to maximise profits at the expense of the amenity of existing neighbours and future residents who will have substandard amenity if this development was approved. In conclusion, Mr Mayor, while I hope the VCAT upholds our neighbourhood character policies, if this matter proceeds to appeal, which looks likely, I also hope they balance considerations of the parking, access and location of buildings and setbacks to find that this is an overdevelopment of the site. Thank you, Mr Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Shaw. Any other discussion, councillors? If not, I shall put the motion. All those in favour? Against, it's carried. Now, before we go to other reports, item 6.5.1, which is the draft City Plan 2017-2021, proposed integrated plan and budget of 2017 to 2018. I believe, Madam CEO, we do have a question which relates to the budget.
Yes, we do. Thank you, Mr Mayor. We have a question from W. Strong. Bill, you're there. Thank you. The question is, tonight's agenda item 6.5.1 draft budget, attachment 3, proposed fees and charges 2017-18, page 147 of 184, hiring of community facilities, Old Shire offices. Why aren't the rooms occupied by the Werribee Historical Society and Museum and financial details included under the heading of Old Shire offices? So I'll throw that to myself to answer. In the budget papers, and I'm sure because you've read them, Bill, there's all of the facilities, all of the community facilities that we have, all of the rooms that are out for hire are listed, not necessarily the organisations that might be using those rooms. So that's the only reason I can suggest that it's not specifically mentioned in there. If there's any concern that you have because it's not mentioned, I'm happy to talk to you about that later. But I think you'll see that all of the rest of the community facilities, again, just have the rooms and not any of the specific hall users in there, or the room users in there.
Thank you, Madam CEO. Now, we shall need to, let me see, Councillor Marcus, I believe you've got a conflict of interest. If you could vacate the chamber, please, and we'll bring you in as soon as we've finished. Councillors, as I've already read out, item 6.5.1, can I have a mover for the budget? Councillor Gibbons, a seconder. Councillor Hooper. Yeah, 6.5.1. Point 1. Yep. Hooper. Okay. So, councillors, Councillor Marcus had a conflict of interest, so we're actually going to vote and discuss point 1 of the recommendation. So, councillors, is there any comment on this item? If not, I shall put the recommendation as the motion. All those in favour? Against, it's carried. Okay, if we could get Councillor Marcus back in, please. And Councillor McElhaney, I believe you've got an item on point 2 of the recommendation, so if you could leave the chamber, thank you. This will keep you fit, Steve. You won't have to. No jogging in the morning now. Okay, councillors, we need a mover for this item. Councillor Gibbons again. Thank you. Councillor Hooper. Okay. Councillors, is there any discussion on point 2 of the recommendation? If not, I shall put the motion. All those in favour? Against? It's carried. No, we do Okay. So, councillors, we come to the last of the three motions to this issue, points 3 to 18. Do I have a mover of that? Councillor Gibbons, seconder, Councillor Maynard. Councillors, discussions. Councillor Gibbons.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I have pleasure in moving the recommendation. And from the outset, I need to be clear that we're not making a final decision tonight on the budget and city plan. Excuse me. Tonight, we're adopting a draft city plan and budget to enable it to go to community consultation, include the hearing of public submissions as required by the Local Government Act. I'm hoping that the community scrutinises these documents at our Civic Centre, our libraries, as on our website until 5 p.m. Wednesday, the 31st of May, so that we can hear submissions at a special council meeting at 5 p.m. on the 13th of June before we make our final decisions at another special council meeting on the 27th of June. We should also note that as well as setting out the actions and services we will provide for year one of the council term, the draft integrated plan and budget 2017-2018 also includes a strategic resource plan for 4 years from 2017 to 2021 as required by law. Mr Mayor, tonight we also realise Council's rating strategy, which is attached to the report. Our rating strategy is informed by the good work of community members on our rating strategy advisory group. One aspect that is often not highlighted is the fact that under our differential rates, which some other councils do not have, occupied properties, farmland, rural lifestyle land are rated at less cents in the dollar than their capital improved value than commercial or industrial developed or vacant land. Mr Mayor, as you know, I've been a long-term resident and was first elected to council 38 years ago. It seems like ages, doesn't it? He wasn't. Councillor Gilligan says he wasn't born there.
There's a few in this chamber that weren't too.
You can't beat age, can you? Mayor, Mr Mayor, as you know, I've been a long-term resident and was first elected to council 38 years ago and have seen many budgets come and go. In this time, it is true to say that Wyndham has undergone phenomenal growth and change. This means that today we have many parts of Wyndham that are well established, sitting alongside areas that have just been built. Not many councils in Australia face the scale of challenges that we face. So it is with great pride that I move tonight's motion, which includes a budget with a record $133.1 million for capital works during 2017-18, with $19.3 million of funds forecast to be carried forward to complete projects that were included in the 2016-17 budget. This brings the total proposed and record capital works program to a record $152.4 million for 2017-18. Many other councillors will no doubt mention projects they would like to highlight, so I do not want to mention, so I just did want to mention a few in my capacity as Council's Tourism and Major Events Portfolio Holder, which also includes responsibility for our existing new activity centres and shopping strips. I'm pleased to see us continuing to invest in the future of the Werribee CBD and starting this year with a kick-off with the Riverbank Promenade project just behind Watton Street as one of our catalyst development sites. With significant multi-million dollar investments like it in subsequent years for this project, I can say with confidence that in my time, this critical activation project will be delivered and act as a key contributor to our goal for Werribee to become the new capital of the West. It is also worth noting that at a cost of $11.4 million over 2 years, with $3.2 million funding from the State Government Growing Suburbs Fund, we will significantly improve Werribee Park adjacent to the Riverbank Promenade. At a small level, but just as important for activating Werribee, this budget also includes $500,000 on improved directional and wayfinding signage, streetscape and public space improvements for Werribee CBD. While not about money, but just as important for the future quality of life for residents is the financial success of businesses. One initiative this year's city plan is worth singing out, Mr Mayor. This initiative will see Council develop a policy framework to consider land use, economic, financial and urban design, car parking, community facility and utility servicing requirements for our activity centres. And so, Mr Mayor, I will stop here, just as I'm sure that councillors will have other areas they wish to highlight. As someone who has been in and around council life for nearly 40 years, Mr Mayor, I remain just as confident today that the things we do each year to improve the quality of life for local residents and businesses. Wyndham is a large, complex and diverse council. Mr Mayor, I'm proud of Werribee and proud to be a councillor. And so, with this year's record capital works commitments, I'm even more proud to move this motion tonight. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Gibbons. Councillors, any other comments? Councillor Shaw.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I am pleased to speak in favour of the motion to place the draft budget and city plan on public exhibition and to receive public submissions at a special council meeting on 13 June. There are many components of the draft budget and city plan I am glad to see included as a result of the input that the newly elected council has had. Before I outline some particular areas, I want to acknowledge the collaborative approach the CEO and staff have undertaken in working with the newly elected council to finalise these two critical documents. Some in chamber may not know that some councils are not included in numerous detailed discussions on budgets and city plans, and so the partnership we share with staff is real and appreciated. In relation to specific areas, I would single out the one I'm most pleased to see included is the unparalleled increase in expenditure on smaller local parks in Wyndham. The inclusion of $1.75 million, which I did help to advocate for over the next 12 months for playground and park upgrades in the draft budget, is an example of how a vision I expressed for family and community connections during my election campaign has now got traction and support from all councillors. Investing in local parks and open spaces is strongly supported by the Wyndham 2040 community vision. I've looked at a lot of stories councils have collected for this strategy, and local parks and open spaces was consistently identified as Wyndham's greatest asset and something to be strengthened in the future. Community members talked about having these places to unwind after a long day, connect with local residents and record many fond memories with family and friends. So this unparalleled investment is welcome news, and I expect the community will embrace. Another area I would single out is the continuation of 15 hours of kindergarten access for children in their last year before school. While the research is clear that a minimum of 15 hours of quality early learning per week in the year before school is critical to the development of young children, this service is under threat if the federal government does not continue their component of funding beyond 2017. We've been highlighting our concerns as part of an advocacy campaign across our kindergarten centres and more widely, and as Council's family-friendly portfolio holder, I'd also like to specifically thank Councillor Gilligan for his advocacy and leadership in this area. Mr Mayor, it would be a great shame if Council had to revisit the revenue assumptions we've made in the draft budget of fully funding for the entire 12 months a total of 15 hours of kindergarten for each child. If this happens as a result of the federal government walking away from their funding commitment, we would be left around $2 million short over 6 months, and Council may have to consider reducing the hours from 15 hours to 10 or paying for the shortfall ourselves, something which could affect other areas of service. As a working single parent, the idea that this critical program could be cut is personally distressing, and my concerns have also been expressed by many local mums and dads I have spoken to. And speaking of advocacy, Mr Mayor, I'm also pleased that a number of projects and changes implemented by the CEO and staff over the last 18 months will see us strongly advocate to other levels of government about things affecting our community. Since being elected, I've undergone a steep learning curve about which areas of local life are controlled by council and which ones are not. I accept that we cannot control every aspect of local life, especially when other levels of government have the policy and financial powers that we do not have. But this steep learning curve has given me an understanding of what motivates a lot of the work that councillors and staff do, a shared commitment to improve the quality of life for local residents and businesses. Our advocacy will increasingly become more than just our loud voice being heard, but also for our data and campaigning to improve on a range of critical topics. This includes topics many residents tell me impacts on them the most: traffic, congestion, and a lack of effective public transport. There are also related issues including redevelopments for the Werribee and Hoppers Crossing train stations, parking at all of our train stations, increased peak hour services, and of course, more funding for local schools, roads and other community infrastructure. I'm confident this draft budget and city plan, as well as the organisational restructure the CEO has undertaken, supports the notion that our advocacy across the organisation will improve and that our data and campaigning will lead to solid outcomes over the course of this council term. Our community collaboration and the commitment and the hard work of our CEO and the key staff on the youth detention centre issue is one example that can only leave one feeling optimistic about improving our advocacy efforts. Mr Mayor, in closing, I want to say that I support the draft budget and city plan and the record level of capital works and services we are proposing to provide over the next year. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Shaw. Councillors, any other comment? Councillor Maynard.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Mr Mayor, it is important to note that, as Councillor Gibbons has mentioned and Councillor Shaw has also, that in supporting this motion we are placing this budget on public exhibition as our draft budget and our city plan, and this includes a 4-year strategic resource plan which contains assumptions about our longer-term financial projections. Our longer-term financial viability will become increasingly important as we roll out consultation about our long-term financial plan as part of our rate capping consultation we will undertake in the future. And speaking of rate capping, and Mr Mayor, I have definite views on rate capping, but suffice to say that I note that we will not be applying for a variation to the state government's mandated rate cap of 2%. The average rate increase of 2% will be respected whilst maintaining services and financial sustainability. I would also note that our integrated city plan and budget both closely align with Wyndham 2040 Community Vision's 4 key areas, including people, community, places and spaces, earning and learning, and finally leadership and participation. The city plan also incorporates our community health, wellbeing and safety plan. Having been around for 5 years now as a council, I think it is important for us to pause and consider this point. The integration of our approaches to our budget, city plan and other wellbeing plans is further evidence that we are a more engaged and responsive council working hard to meet community needs. Mr Mayor, the combined number of pages in these documents runs into several hundred, and I know having read them, and we've certainly tried to keep the information as understandable as possible, especially for the non-CPAs like myself, and it can be quite technical at times. So in the interest of simplifying key matters, I'll make the following points. New borrowings of $16 million for capital works are proposed for the 17-18 financial year, taking the total debt to $71 million by the end of the financial year. In the new language of other levels of government, Mr Mayor, this is a good debt at a time of record low interest rates. I will, however, make the point this time that despite the views of the Essential Services Commission that we should leverage much larger levels of debt, we are taking a sober approach to the levels of debt, as there is no single lever we can pull to respond to the new rate capping regime of the state government. Council's headline operating surplus for 2017-18 is proposed to be $187.1 million. Sounds a lot. However, it should be noted that these include gifted subdivision assets, developer contributions and non-recurring grants for capital works. Excluding these capital items results in an underlying operating surplus of $17.5 million. A much smaller buffer for the next 12 months. A break-even or better result is a key financial sustainability indicator of the state government, and this is net operating surplus will also assist in funding capital works programs. Speaking of our capital works budget, and Councillor Gibbons and Shaw have already touched on the record nature of the proposed spend. It is important, this is important as our community continually tells us that they want council to be providing more vital community infrastructure, And I think it's important we acknowledge the work of successive councils and councillors and officers at Wyndham for this contribution. When I go and visit other councils, they're certainly amazed at the level of capital spend that this council has, when quite a number of councils would have a total operating budget of $20 million, and we have a capital spend 6-7 times that. It's certainly mind-blowing, Mr Mayor. I'm also quick to remind them that this is not only to try and keep pace with population growth and changing needs, but to also reinvest in the ageing infrastructure in the more established areas of Wyndham. As I said, Mr Mayor, I don't want to mention all of the significant investments on roads, community centres, as well as parks and sporting facilities, but I would single out one project that is close to my heart over the many years, and this is the $9 million spend on the extension of Armstrong Road in Wyndham Vale from Greens Road to Black Forest Road. This may seem like a large sum of money for just one project, but the scale of the infrastructure challenges we face in Wyndham certainly mean that these large figures are not unusual. The further construction of Armstrong Ison Road to Bulburn Road from Black Forest Road is proposed to be completed by around 2019. However, the cost of the bridge over the Geelong-Melbourne train line remains unfunded by the state government at a cost of approximately $40 million. This gives me the opportunity to say that council alone cannot fund all that is required in the community to improve quality of life. While it is my view we are doing more than pulling our weight, we also rely on crucial funding from other levels of government, which we will continue to advocate strongly for over the balance of this council term. In closing, Mr Mayor, I want to give councillors considering their first budget and city plan, as well as the community, confidence that the CEO and staff provide councillors and the community with many monitoring reports over the course of the year. Progress is reported regularly, and this includes measures that are both performance and outcome based, and we receive quarterly performance reports. Thank you, Mr Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Maynard. Councillors, any other comment? Councillor Gill.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. It's fantastic to be part of my first ever budget as the elected councillor in Chafee Ward. And as I stated in my election material, one of the things that I thought was most important was to dedicate resources towards the highest priorities in our community, and I believe this budget does exactly that. As Council's portfolio holder for Learning Cities, it is exciting to see a 4.67% increase on year, increase on year in terms of investment in our kinner services, from 14.13 million to 14.79, and an 8.32% increase on year in investment in our libraries. Council has heard loud and clear that residents want us to work with state and federal governments to deliver on the infrastructure challenges of our city. And that is why in this draft budget, we are ramping up significantly spending in this area from about 18.39% of Wyndham's total budget expenditure to 22.14% of the investment in the Infrastructure Capital Works program. This, in culmination with the billions of dollars in new investment in roads in Wyndham by the Victorian Government, sees record investment in infrastructure in our municipality, creating local jobs and delivering the prosperity that our community needs and deserves. As the portfolio holder for youth, it is important we see strong investment in this space. And that's why it's fantastic to see in this budget the saltwater active youth space and also modernising Wyndham's Youth Resource Centre outdoor area. In Chafee Ward, we're also seeing a further investment of $700,000 of new monies into the Baden Power Drive Park youth space, taking the infrastructure investment for young people to over $1 million, a strong investment in the fastest growing demographic in our city. I'm proud to see that this council has entrenched in our city plan a strong focus to tackle the scourge of problem gambling. As mentioned before, problem gambling represents a $95 million a year hit on average to the pockets of families and individuals in Wyndham. By 2020, I hope measures we put in place to tackle this issue through our emerging responsible gambling strategy becomes a defining achievement of this council's term. Investing in the RDF is critical for Wyndham's future. Whilst there are some critics in this space about our ongoing investment in this facility, any move to abandon this investment would undermine our financial position, would lead to deficits and we will have to cut services, and it's important to be frank about that. Mr Mayor, it would be remiss of me not to call on the Victorian Auditor General's Office to reconsider the way it requires councils to display their surpluses in budgets. As mentioned by Councillor Maynard, the surplus projected for 17-18 is $187.1 million, significantly inflated when you consider that it takes into account developer contributions and gifted assets that do not truly represent surplus cash. When you take this out, we're left with a $17.5 million net operating surplus, an important distinction when we come to discussing rate capping again in the future. It'd be like a first home buyer going down to the bank and suggesting that they have a deposit made up of 50 grand for a home loan, but when it comes to handing over the cash to settle, the bank realises they counted 30,000 of it as their car. At least in this example, it's actually convertible into cash. Mr Mayor, there's a tucked away achievement on page 25 of our budget that has the ability to yield significant results for our city, and one that deserves to be recognised. Council's development of an alternative broad-based financial and funding framework to garner state and federal funding for Wyndham's infrastructure projects is a true game changer for this municipality. Pursuing value capture and alternative funding models to deliver major infrastructure projects such as the Davis Road train station in Tarnee, Black Forest Road train station, will require robust public policy work, and I commend Kate Roffey and her team alongside Kelly Grigsby for their bold vision in venturing in this space. Dedicating resources to this area of council operations is paramount, and I will be a strong backer of this initiative in the times ahead, so well done to them and no pressure on the work to come. Finally, I will finish by commending the significant investment we will make into Werribee CBD in this budget. Werribee is open for business, and the modernisation of the CBD at the heart of Wyndham is long overdue, as mentioned by Councillor Gibbons. The foresight by this council to develop business cases to revitalise and recognise all that we have to offer in this part of our city is also a game changer for this municipality. I commend this budget to the public and look forward to speaking to residents about their views and what we intend to do to deliver a stronger Wyndham. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Gillard. Councillors, any other discussion? Councillor Hooper.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. At the outset, I would like to thank officers for their time, care and professionalism in the process of developing this budget and the strategic plan. As a newly elected councillor, there has certainly been a great deal of information and advice to get my head around, and this would not have been possible without the dedication and support of both council staff and my fellow councillors as a united team. There is so much I could speak about, but for the benefit of the gallery and the other councillors yet to speak, I will limit my comments to the highlights that spring to mind. I'm glad to see the continuing funds put aside to deliver the Williams Landing Sports Reserve. While there has been some community discussion about the use of the land for sports facilities or a school, I would restate earlier public comments that I've made that our residents need access to both their uses, and we need to seize opportunities as they arise. The reserve development, which has already commenced, will create a space where people can engage in healthy activity and come together as a community. Among other things, it will include 2 ovals with flexible space to accommodate multiple sports, 6 tennis courts, a children's playground, half-court basketball, cricket nets, a pavilion including change rooms and community space, and a shared path network. For the remainder of this current financial year, funds have been dedicated to finalising the detailed design of the pavilion, the fields and landscape, as well as commencement of construction of fields and landscape. And during the next financial year, we will complete construction of the fields and the pavilion. I'm also excited that the Sporting Reserve for Point Cook West is proposed to commence to master planning stage. The Point Cook community has embraced their sports facilities, and the demand for sporting reserves is high. So this reserve will provide much needed additional open space for this community. And as Council's Arts, Culture and Heritage portfolio holder, I'm delighted that we're able to upgrade the Wyndham Cultural Centre, currently the highest profile venue in Wyndham for the delivering of cultural services. It possesses much untapped potential to develop the interests of local audiences and the broader Melbourne arts communities, helping to build Wyndham City Centre's tourism draw. As an example, the Melbourne International Comedy Festival Roadshow is on this Friday at that cultural centre. Specific improvements will be determined through the redevelopment needs analysis, service planning and feasibility study to be commissioned in the 17-18 budget, guided by the master plan developed last year by the Crocs and Ramsey architects, which confirms the viability of a staged redevelopment. I'm also pleased to see we will move towards more certainty around our public art, which is critical if we are to be seriously considered ourselves as the new capital of the West. I firmly believe that a healthy public art presence contributes to local quality of life. In this budget and city plan, we will move the public art program forward with an investment of $250,000 per year capital funding. Significantly, we will also commission guidelines within a public art master plan to develop our collection of permanent artworks and opportunities available to the community through temporary projects. This draft master plan will go out for community consultation, as will a new public art policy. As I've always held a keen interest in the development of our own Werribee CBD, I would mention our allocation of $500,000 to undertake the detailed design of the Riverbank Promenade, with funding also allocated for construction over the next 3 years. I look forward to Council receiving these detailed designs, which will guide any future decisions we take on this project. And speaking of how important the design and functionality of our public and open spaces are, I'm glad to see confirmation that over the next 2 years, we'll see large investments in open space acquisitions, designs and construction across many parts of Wyndham. Over the next 2 years, we'll invest more than $17 million in such projects in the Harrison Ward and other wards, and this will include completion of the construction of the Churnside Park Hub redevelopment with $5.2 million in the 17-18 and continuation of Hobbs Road as open space project. I mention a number of these projects not only close to my neck of the woods because many of our residents not only enjoy recreation closer to home, they also access other open space and sporting facilities in other parts of Wyndham as well. And finally, Mr Mayor, no budget or city plan would be complete without a continued and significant investment in our roads, something very close to the hearts of most of our residents. As Councillor Maynard has pointed out, in our record capital works budget, we're committing over $35 million for our road network with projects such as the Forsyth Road duplication between Sayers and Old Geelong Road at $1.5 million. Planning for Ison Road from Geelong Railway Line to Princess Freeway, with construction to commence in 1819. Completion of the construction of Tarney Road duplication between Hogan's Road and the Good News School at $5.5 million. And finally, construction of Armstrong Road from Greens to Black Forest Road at $9 million. You'll note, Mr Mayor, that I have once again mentioned projects closer to the Harrison Ward with others that are further afield. This is because congestion and usability for road users is a connected issue, and what happens in one pocket of Wyndham also affects the overall road network. I look forward to reading our community's feedback on this budget and plan that I support. Thank you.
Right. Thank you, Councillor Hooper. Any other comments, councillors? Councillor McAlane.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I'll just bring up a couple of points further to Councillor Maynard's in regard to the borrowings that we're undertaking this year. As it's stated in the proposed budget, $16 million will be borrowed, and that will bring it up to $71 million. I'd just like to say that is the worst case scenario. If we don't need to borrow it, we won't be borrowing it, I can assure you. However, while total borrowings represent 38.65% of the annual rates revenue, it is still considered low risk by VARGO, and VARGO is the Victorian Auditor General's Office. Borrowings are used to fund intergenerational capital works projects, and that's where the life and the benefit of the asset extends beyond one generation. So I think that's important. We don't want to borrow if we don't have to. The other area that I'd just like to bring up in our budget, employee costs form a significant part of our council's expenditure, and it's hard to compare with other councils as services provided can vary. between the 79 councils. And I'll just give a couple of examples. We've got the RDF, a business, and we have the leisure management facility that recently came on board. This increases both the staff numbers and costs, but also provide a level of revenue offset. We also have amongst us 32% of local government providing kindergartens, and we are one of those 32%, of which we have 23 kindergartens, all staffed by kindergarten staff and support staff. Our Wyndham Towards 2040 organisational structure has deliberately been designed to enable Wyndham staff to deliver high quality services to stakeholders in an agile and flexible manner, and to make it easier for customers to work with us. We focus our attention on the things that matter most to the community, and we will deliver the most value from the money we receive. We also will be looking at removing any duplicate, well, we are starting to do that with our restructuring, and the transformation is remove the duplication across business and minimising outsourcing. So basically we're responding to the growth and ongoing changes in accordance with community expectations. Thank you, Mr Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor McAloney. Councillors, any other comments? Councillor Marcus.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I've been here 11 years and I've gone through many, many budgets. Sometimes I'm very happy, but sometimes I'm not so happy. I will be supporting the recommendation for the draft budget as it stands this evening to go out for community consultation. I believe community consultation process is the most important component in the development of our budget and our city plan. So everyone out there, please make sure, and I know you've all read it, but get your friends to have a good look at it as well. I'm very interested in hearing feedback from our residents, as there are certain areas of the budget and the city plan that I myself would like to see a greater emphasis on. I guess in my time on council, I know that Wyndham is the fastest growing area in Australia and we have many challenges. And when I was the Victorian spokesperson for the National Growth Areas Alliance, we worked hard advocating for all levels of government in state and federal. And it was my ambition that it was a three-way partnership, but at the moment I'm not quite sure that that's happening. These are some of my concerns. I am very concerned about the fees and charges associated with the hiring of performing arts spaces in Wyndham and for the provision of art-related projects generally. Sadly, I'm told constantly by community groups that they have to leave this city because of the hire of the buildings. But it's not just the hire of the building, it is those very high, if you look through there, the high add-on costs, if you understand where I'm coming from. And this, I think, it needs to be looked at. Losing these groups to other cities is losing money to the Wyndham economy. And I would like to think that all of our groups get the opportunity to have their functions here and show us how beautiful they are with what they do. And Council in this budget has called for the public to have a look at the proposed fees and charges, so I hope they do that. Encouraging creativity is so important, and I think perhaps we could do more in this space. But I would also like, and I'm going to continue to say it, to hear the thoughts of the residents. I think we do a wonderful job with our youth, but I would like to see more outreach services for young people who may be at risk. The work done in this area is very important. However, I think we could always do more. This is why I am so keen on the arts, the performing arts and dancing. Again, many people do not want to play sports, but I think if we could encourage them to come in and take part in the performing arts, they may just be happy to do so. Equally, I think the continued support for older residents is something that we need to continue to work on. So I encourage again the residents to have a look at this. There was a great program on the television last night showing how our elderly people in their 80s love dancing, and sadly we do not have ballroom dancing in this city and they have to leave, and I've been harping on that for a long, long time, and I perhaps will see how we can go about doing it. You've spoken about the borrowings. Well, I'm a little bit concerned about the new borrowings of 16 million proposed for the 2017-18, which is taking the total debt to 71 million by the end of the 17-18 financial year. I think all residents understand that they have to stick to a budget, no matter how big or small it might be. And this is the same for this council, state government and federal, because sooner or later we have to pay this money back. And having been in business all my life, I know what it's like to stick to a budget. But now I'll talk about what I'm happy with. It is pleasing to see more funding allocated to our roads as our residents continue to tell us they are concerned about the congestion. And I think the congestion is one area that is concerning them in many parts of this city. It is taking the residents to get from A to B, from Werribee to Hoppers Crossing, over half an hour. Now, this should not be happening in our city. I like the kindergartens. I've always been a very strong advocate for the kindergartens and the library programs, and I think we absolutely do a fantastic job. And I think these are going from strength to strength. And I think the funding to go to the upgrade and construction of community centres to deliver local, responsive and accessible services closer to where they live is absolutely a fantastic program that we're setting ourselves on. As you know, I have the environment portfolio, and it would be very remiss of me if I didn't say that I'm pleased to see the development and the construction of the Western Animal Facility. The council had been working on this proposal for a few years now, and at last it's coming to fruition. Animals, and especially the animals, fall under my portfolio, and I'm hoping during, and don't laugh everybody, but I'm hoping that I will get the result that I'm looking for, that every cat will be desexed, sterilised, whatever you like to say, and registered. I know it's a big call, but the Peter McKinnon, the manager, he's all for it, and we want to go for it to make sure that we can educate our people and make sure that this happens. So I think the funding allocated to these areas is money well spent. Council officers have worked very hard with the councillors to develop this draft budget and city plan. We've been away for a weekend, we've had many, many workshops, and now this is what's going out for the residents to have their say. So I'd certainly look forward to the residents and to see what they have to say, because remember, we need your feedback, as this is a partnership between, it's your money, it is a partnership between residents and the council. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Marcus. Councillors, any other discussion? Councillors, Councillor Khan.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Look, I was waiting for everyone to say, so I think the number of the items I would like to say that have been covered, but I'd like to say that now that the capital work we've selected is $133 million out of the entire budget. And we know that near the carry forward is 19 million. That makes 152 million capital work. Capital work is important for the city to have, and that includes number of projects. On page number 92 of 125, it talks about what's the definition or how the capital works money is going to be distributed. I have seen here now the roads. I know that there's a number of councillors are passionate about roads, but when I do comparison, I still believe, my view is, we're spending quite a lot on roads, but not enough. We're only spending $36.2 million out of 152 million. And the roads, what I'm hearing every day when I go cafes, local, people talks about traffic and roads. I know there's other aspect of that city which is need to be maintained, such as footpaths and cycleways, drainage, recreation, leisure and community facility. I'm echoing my fellow councillor's voice. Heather Marcus talks about there is a lack of facility here, but we're only spending $16 million on that out of the capital work. So these figures are actually alarming and need to be restructured in a way are we actually listening to the public? I know this is a draft budget, and that's the reason why the public can make a comment and come forward and say where you want to spend your money, because at the end of the day, it's their money. I also notice here 66.323 millions we're spending of that capital works money on total property. So the council engaged to acquire land improvement, building improvements, and that out of $152 million, 66 million goes for the property. Now, how much the general public using property, this is a question mark, but I do know that now. And the second part of this thing, which is called infrastructure, where is the people's life being affected? Now, I'm being disappointed here, saying that the money which is not has been allocated for recreation and later in the community facilities, which is only 16 million out of 152 million. I know now we are now borrowing the money, which we're borrowing $16 million. No one likes to borrow the money. Everyone hates to borrow the money. But this is because of the state governments not giving a funding, putting in a situation we have to borrow the money. That will put us in $71 million in a debt in 2017-18. $16 million is a borrowing now. So we actually borrowing the money to carry out our capital work. Now here we're also now spending money, $5.32 million on computers and telecommunication. So I'm not sure how that was important to spend 5.324 million on computers and telecommunication. But what I believe, it's a good budget, but I'm being disappointed. I like to see the more money allocated for roads. And only roads we're serving is here in this entire budget. It's only not many roads, just the 4 roads, which is Armstrong Road, Tarney duplication, and widening of the Harper Lane, and obviously the other 2 roads which is mentioned here and resurfacing of the roads. So I feel it's 36 million out of 152 is too low to allocate that budget. I will be now speaking to a number of residents, and they've said that, they want better roads, they want more money to be spent on roads. So this is my concern. I would like to put a council in a notice saying that, I will not be supporting this, because I love to support. There are many good things here, but because of my disappointment and interactions with the community, is less money have been allocated for the roads. People's life been affected to the roads and parks, which is enough, but not enough. So I think we need to work how we can actually satisfy those people who are paying the money, the ratepayers in the greater city of this Wyndham. I know, and Heather Marks have said that the city is the fastest growing council in the entire Australia. If it's the fastest growing city in Australia, are we only spending $36 million, or we can restructure?
Can I call a point of order, please? I've sat and I've listened, and I think I have to.
Councillor Maynard.
Mr. Mayor,
Point of order.
I do call a point of order, and the point of order is statements that will or are likely to mislead or deceive a person. Council Code of Conduct Clause 5BB. Mr. Mayor, this council has spent the last number of months frugally working out what it needs to spend. It has in the vicinity of something like 1,400 kilometres of roads that it is responsible for in the network of this municipality. I think that the budget that this council has put forward is fair and frugal, and we will never have enough money.
Okay, I take on board your point of order, but Councillor Khan, please continue.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Look, I echo my fellow councillors' comment, but what I said here, and it's my democratic right to say here, is enough is spending, but it's not enough as per the council's growth. The new suburbs coming here, Tarney, Wyndham Well, there's old builders. I know that now, but I think we know $36 million have been spent, but it's not enough. So thank you, Mr. Mayor. I would like to close my concern regarding this spending on roads. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Khan. Councillors, any other comments? Because if there are no other comments, obviously I can't debate But what I would like to do is put it on the record that over a number of months, councillors, you've all worked very, very closely together as a team. It's never easy to spend and find enough money to do what we want. And I want to congratulate you all on, in particular, working together as a team, even when others have disagreed with some of your comments or with what you believe to be a priority and what's not a priority. I think we've worked very well with the council officers and the CEO, and it's never easy. It blew me away that we had $130 million in capital works. It's, that's bigger than some small countries around the world. And let me tell you, to be able to do it with minimal borrowings, depending on our assets, I think is great. So thank you all for the efforts that you've put in over the last probably 3 to 4 months. And I look forward to see what the community's got to say over the next, 5 weeks? 5 weeks, and see what happens. And hopefully, if the community come to us and say, I want you to spend more money on X, Y, Z, they'll have looked at the budget and said, this is where you can find the savings to spend it somewhere else. So where one person wins, another person misses out, unfortunately. So with that very little off-the-cuff comment, I would like to put it to the councillors. All those in favour? Against? Okay, thank you. It's carried. Next item is 6.5.2, the appointment of councillors to Youth Justice Centre Community Advisory Group. And councillors, and for the chamber, we're going to split this recommendation into 2 parts. Part 1 will be a motion in its own right, so that councillors can endorse that we are going to appoint 3 councillors to the advisory board, and motion 2 will be items 2, 3 and 4, where we will nominate 3 councillors. So I'm looking for a mover and a seconder for motion number 1, which is item 1 on your records there. So Councillor Hooper as a mover, as a seconder, Councillor Maynard. Councillors, any discussion on endorsing the appointment of 3 councillors? If there isn't any, I shall put the motion. All those in favour? Against? It's carried. So now the items 2, 3 and 4 for motion number 2. Can I have a mover? Councillor Shaw. Can I have a seconder? Councillor Khan, second. Thank you. Councillor Shaw, any comments?
Yeah, thank you, Mr Mayor. I wish to move this item, and in doing so, I wish to nominate Councillors Maynard, Villagonzalo and McElhaney to represent council as per the previous motion.
Thank you. And councillors, is there any comment or debate to the motion? Councillor Shaw, thank you.
Just briefly, there is no doubt that this has been a significant issue for our community, and I'm pleased that council has been invited to play a representative role in the Community Advisory Committee. The councillors I have nominated represent each of the 3 wards, as I feel this is a city-wide matter and all communities should be represented. Thank you, Mr Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Shaw. Any other comment, councillors? Councillor Marcus.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Yes, this has been a very big issue within this city, and there's one particular lady that I'd like to thank very much, and that's Natalie Walker. She has worked so very hard. We solved the problem of Werribee South, but then we have the people of Little River, Westerly Gardens and Riverwalk that might not have the same feelings. In fact, I've had more flack from these areas than I had from Werribee South. So I would just like to say it is great to see now that the advisory group is being implemented, and that there were 3 councillors invited to go on it, along with representatives from our community. So first time the government's done something right about this Youth Justice Centre. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Marcus. Councillors, any other comment? If not, I shall put the motion. All those in favour? Thank you, and congratulations, Councillor Maynard, Villagonzalo and McElhaney for being on this advisory group, and I wish you good luck. Item 6.5.3, the 2016-17 Capital Works Program third quarter review. The recommendations on page 97. A mover, please. Councillor Shaw. A seconder. Councillor Gibbons. Councillors, any discussion on the Capital Works Program third quarter review? Councillor Maynard.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Just, I suppose, reiterating some comments that were made in the draft budget recommendation. This further just shows the reporting mechanisms that are in place within this council. Thank you, Mr Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Maynard. Any other comments? Councillor Khan.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Look, I'd like to say that, you know, we have allocated in quarter $220 million and quarter $304 million. But now we carrying forward $15.9 million on capital expenditure. I think if we can sort of minimise that carry forward business, it might. I know that there's a number of reasons the way carry forward goes because of the number of projects cannot deliver within a time frame due to the number of things. But we'd love to see that if the entire, or not entire, at least maximum money can be utilised. Thank you, Mr Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Khan. Councillor McElhaney.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. The quarter three report reflects a carry forward of 15.9, which is a forecast position at the end of March. And we do forecast our capital position each month, and the carry forward number that's in the proposed budget for 17-18 reflects a 19 million. So if anyone's querying the variance, it just reflects some of the changes that are identified in April. Any material changes to be expected carry forward number will be detailed in the final budget document and council report. But obviously we would be trying to reduce the carry forward as much as we can. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor McElhaney. Any other comments, councillors? If not, I'll put the motion. All those in favour? Against? Now, do we just don't run away yet, Mr Lambert? Mr Lambert has to leave the chamber. Yes, he does because he's on the board. Before you do leave, this was a bold new direction of council, the Western Leisure Services Board, and you were the council representative on that, and it's worked out really, really well, and I want to thank you for your efforts in doing that. And I'm sorry that you have to leave the chamber, but as of tomorrow, you're no longer a member of staff. So, thank you, poor Steve. No, could I have a mover, please? Councillor Gilligan and Shaw McElhaney. Councillor, you got beaten by 1 second when the hands flew up in the air. So, Councillor McElhaney as a seconder. Councillors, any discussion on the resolution, the recommendation as page 101? I'll start off with Councillor. You're around second again, Councillor McElhaney. Councillor Maynard, followed by Councillor McElhaney.
I'm happy to yield to the seconder, Mr Mayor.
You are. Thank you for that. Councillor McElhaney.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I'd just like to say that all three recommendations are in line with good governance practices and, as stated, provides a skill-based appointment which will ensure confidence, integrity and best practice in the organisation. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Maynard, you'd like to add something?
Mr Mayor, just to say further that this was a bold step, as you did say previously, that this council took, and it certainly spent quite a deal of time interviewing and ensuring that the board is certainly skills-based in this area. And I don't need to say that there were the naysayers about Aquapulse and Eagle Stadium. It is absolutely bursting at the seams. Thank you, Mr Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Maynard. Councillors, any other comment? If not, I'll put the motion. All those in favour? I'll do that again. All those in favour? Against? Okay. There was one abstain.
I'm abstaining for you.
Yeah, okay. One abstain. Thank you. Councillor Khan, abstaining. Otherwise, the motion is carried. Councillors, 6.5.5, Assembly of Councillors. Recommendation on page 103. A mover, please. Councillor Hooper. A seconder, Councillor Gibbons. Comment, councillors? No? Okay, just for the record. Oh, Councillor Maynard, thank you.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I was a bit slow. Didn't have my grandpa nap this afternoon.
It's getting pretty late for you.
Thank you, I know, yes. Just suffice to say, Mr Mayor, that the report is certainly reflective of the time that councillors do put in. Time for, is that round one, is it?
Symbolic for the moment.
That's your time up.
Certainly reflective of the time and effort that councillors put into carrying out their duties, and I commend them. Thank you.
Great. Thank you, Councillor Maynard. Councillor Khan.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. It's given me pleasure to say that, Star Weekly ran a story on saying that, I have been noted for apologies and absent. Mr Mayor, there has been here some of the assembly which has not been noted when we went out in entire. And this is just the work we do, which is, for example, we went out to do a budget preparation where that has not been accounted. So can I request now in the near future, if any
Councillor Khan, can I clarify what budget preparation dates are you talking about?
Mr Mayor, there was, I know that this is a bit of not related particular that meeting and that month, but we're talking about the budget preparation, and that was
Councillor Khan. You had the Assembly of Councillors reports come on a monthly basis, and if you're talking about a different month, that should have been raised at that particular meeting. I take that on board. I'm going to allow you some leniency, only some leniency, in actually how and what you want to say.
Thank you, Mr.
It's
Mayor.
got to be relevant to the report in front of us, as you know, according to the meeting rules.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. I just thought there's room for improvement in near future. If any assembly happen, and such as happened in the past, they can be included. So therefore, it's kind of as my fellow councillor said, that, those people attending the meetings, so those not attending meetings, the word can be appreciated. And I do acknowledge the number of the apologies I've sent it, and I've been absent due to some various reasons. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
No worries. Thank you for that, Councillor Khan. Councillors, any other comments? If not, I shall put the motion. All those in favour? Against is carried. I've got to get to the end eventually. We now have item 7.1, notices of motion. Notice of motion 568, social procurement policy. Councillors, the recommendations on page 110. Can I have a mover for that, please? Councillor Villa-Gonzalo, thank you. And councillors, a seconder. Councillor Rahn, thank you. Councillors, any comment? Councillor Villa-Gonzalo, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Tonight I am seeking the support of my fellow councillors to pass a motion that will start a process aiming to develop a social procurement policy for Wyndham by July this year, then submit it to council for discussion and for adoption by the end of 2017. Let me explain what it is and why we need it. When President Donald Trump says buy American and hire American, he is talking about social procurement. When our federal government negotiated the procurement of submarines and Navy ships worth $89 billion, they required that there be local content and that local Australian companies participate in the manufacture and supply of major and minor components, as well as the services. They were talking about social procurement. Victoria's Level Crossing Removal Authority and the Western Distribution Project require a social procurement plan from project delivery partners who need to demonstrate that their proposal benefit the community. The state government of Victoria, through its social enterprise strategy, is developing a whole of government framework to create opportunities supporting social enterprises through the procurement process. Social procurement is defined as the intentional generation of social value through the procurement processes. It occurs when organizations like the Wyndham City Council, buying goods and services or delivering works, choose to get a social outcome over and above the products and services required. As council, we approved last month the awarding of a contract worth $2 million for the upgrade of the Hoppers Lane. On the agenda tonight, we will decide on the awarding of a $1.4 million contract for mowing of our sports fields. A few minutes ago, we passed the draft budget with a capital works program worth $152 million. Whenever we spend ratepayers' money, we currently don't, but we should be asking the questions. How many local jobs did we create through these contracts? How much local content is there? What participation did our local businesses have in these transactions? Windham has one of the highest rates of unemployment in the country, especially with our youth and disadvantaged communities. And many of our residents are stressed by the hours of worsening traffic situations they face going to and from work and are seeking local jobs so they can spend more quality time with their families. We want more local jobs. That is the bottom line. And that is the social outcome we want. More local jobs are what we get when we have a healthier and more prosperous local economy, where businesses grow and are able to hire more staff. We want to support local social enterprises which are running businesses and creating jobs while addressing needs in our community. Social procurement is one of the more effective and practical means of achieving that objective. Tonight, we are not going to vote yes or no to a proposed social procurement policy. We don't have a finished product yet. We are proposing to use council resources to build a business case for it. The motion before us is whether we want to have a social procurement policy for Windham. When we vote yes, we vote for this council putting the Windham community first and smarter when spending ratepayers' money. As in the words of the US President, and I'm not really a fan, let us buy Windham. Let us hire Windham. I commend this motion to my
Thank you,
fellow
Councillor Villa-Gonzalo, and I must say personally I'm pleased that you're not a friend of Donald Trump. Councillors, a very worthwhile motion. We have a seconder, Councillor Ahn. Do you want to add anything to that? No? Any other comment, councillors? Councillor Gilligan.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I just want to commend Councillor Villa-Gonzalo for this bold step, and he's highlighted within the content that he's provided about some of the areas that we should examine, particularly when we develop a social procurement policy. And as he stated, you see this when it comes to, within the federal sphere, the debate around apprenticeships and ensuring in infrastructure projects there is an allocation of jobs that are for apprentices. Here on a local level, there has been conversations, particularly on a portfolio level in my area of Learning City and youth, about whether or not there should be a minimum percentage of young people hired by the City of Windham. I think this particular step, the first step, will be a great way to really delve into this and have a look at whether it is feasible or not. And like I stated, I commend Councillor Villa-Gonzalo for this first step, and I look forward to seeing the progress that will be undoubtedly made in this space. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Gilligan. Any other comments, councillors? Councillor Hooper.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. As my colleagues have indicated, and as per the Department of Planning and Community Development, social procurement involves using buying processes and purchasing power to generate positive social outcomes in addition to the delivery of efficient goods, services and works. For local government, social procurement builds on initiatives already undertaken by the sector in enhancing sustainable and strategic procurement practice, enabling buying to effectively contribute to building stronger communities and meeting the social objectives of councils. I'm very supportive of making a stronger local economy and creating jobs within our city. In my view, this is the key issue for our community. Youth unemployment remains much higher than the state average. A report from the Brotherhood of St Lawrence released last year revealed that 17.3% of youth unemployment rate in the West across Brimbank, Maribyrnong, Melton, Hobsons Bay and Windham. Melbourne's West also had the 12th highest rate of unemployment youth in Australia. So just on this element alone, we need solid jobs growth in our city. These facts would normally mean that I would lend full support to a motion encouraging supporting our local economy. However, I'm also acutely aware of the pressures of rate capping on our city, which has been discussed here previously tonight. To quickly sum up, we have significant growth in our city. We cannot pause the growth in PSPs approved by the state government. Council doesn't have the power to refuse subdivisions on the basis that there is too much growth and not enough infrastructure spending. With developer contributions not covering the total cost of the development, it is also up to the council to fund the balance. And with rate capping limiting what council can raise, it also means there is even more pressure on this council to deliver on our community's expectations. That is not to say that the community expectations do not include supporting local business and employment outcomes. It is the extent of that expectation that needs to be clarified. What price is the community willing to pay in order to fulfil social procurement objectives? And although this motion does call for a review of policies, its terminology is very specific, including outlining council's role in promoting and supporting social procurement within and outside council. I consider reviewing our procurement practices should certainly involve wider community discussion, as well as consultation with the councillors. Supporting our local economy should be a factor in what we do. I'm, however, concerned that this motion could be considered a bit preemptive, which creates an expectation that changes listed are to be factored in an updated policy. It is the bottom line cost to the community that needs to be discussed and accepted before any such expectations become reality, especially if we are to seek a higher level of rate increases than what the rate capping limits we are faced with today. Accordingly, I do support this motion in that it is a review process and that the points raised are something that we should talk about, but we should talk about with an expectation of not accepting and accepting the outcome that the community wants. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Hooper. Councillors, any further discussion? If not, we'll put the motion. All those in favour? Against? It's carried. We shall move on to notice of motion 7.2, notice of motion 569, proposed citizenship changes. And I'm looking for a mover.
Before we do that, Mr. Mayor, I just want to foreshadow an amendment which will enable us to strike point A but retain all other points of this motion.
Strike at point A and retain the rest. Great.
I will move that.
And you will move that? Thank you. Could we have a seconder, councillors? Councillor Khan. Okay. Discussion, councillors. Councillor Gilligan.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. We are one, but we are many. And from all the lands on earth we come, we share a dream and sing with one voice, I am, you are, we are Australian. Mr. Mayor, these words are sung by hundreds at a time at every citizenship ceremony in Wyndham in this room. And these words embody the purpose of this motion tonight. The federal government's decision to lengthen permanent residency requirements by a further 3 years to achieve Australian citizenship does nothing to address a perceived attack on Australian values in our community, but instead hinders permanent residents, de facto Australians, from participating in full in this country. I use the term de facto Australians to demonstrate who exactly we are talking about. De facto Australians are subject to the same income tax laws as we are. They live in the same streets as we do. They invest in the same businesses we invest in. They obey the same rule of law as we do. And those fortunate enough to own their own home pay the same rates as an Australian citizen. Why would we then deny them the right of fully participating in society as full Australians for a further 3 years due to a cut-off date that was plucked out of the air? And there are many permanent residents in Wyndham, according to 2011 latest ABS data. In the city of Wyndham, 16,872 of us were new arrivals within 5 years prior to 2011. 54,404 people in this municipality in 2011 were born overseas and sought to make Australia their home. This is a percentage that is far higher than Greater Melbourne average. Now, that is not to say that all of these people are permanent residents. Some are already citizens and some opt not to be for a variety of reasons. However, these numbers paint a clear and incontrovertible reality that these changes will have a substantial impact on the Wyndham community. As outlined by the demographic profiler Atlas ID, recent arrivals are migrants who receive many services that, quote, local government, unquote, funds and delivers. It is therefore clear that the sheer number of people in this municipality that this affects, in culmination with the fact that we administer citizenship ceremonies, means it is a matter for this council to consider. And tonight's motion is therefore not one of whether it falls within the purview of local government. It is whether we believe in egalitarianism and ensuring that government policy doesn't further entrench a social divide like the one proposed through the lengthening of the permanent residency agreement. This is particularly the case for those who wait a further 3 years because they missed a deadline of April 20th that they knew never existed. The response since I sought consultation with community has been extraordinary. I want to share a story of a couple in Wyndham Vale. Both tertiary educated professionals from Australian universities. One is a practicing nurse, the other is a construction manager. They pay their taxes, they obey the rule of law, and they contribute to society like each and every one of us. One is Australian, the other was born from the Middle East. They recently had a baby daughter, an Australian citizen, and one of those 87 babies born a week that all councillors often reference when we talk about population in this city. We live in extraordinary times when the father, who studied in Victoria for 5 years, moved from a student visa to a permanent resident for a further 2, and now has to wait until 2020 before he can become an Australian citizen under these new proposed changes. He will not have the chance to hold an Australian passport, to work on frontline services in the public sector, or to express his voice at the ballot box. A right to participate in a democratic system that many people have fought and died for here at home and abroad. This couple in Wyndham Vale is just one of countless examples of how these citizenship changes impact on our community, Wyndham residents. There is no logical reason why any government would move to entrench a two-class social divide in one's household. The recent announcement by the New Zealand government in securing exemptions for Kiwis in relation to the lengthening permanency requirements highlights that public advocacy can and does have the ability to influence this issue, as it did with our position on the Youth Justice Facility. In my view, we need to send a strong message that we too agree that a lack of retrospective consideration given is grossly unjust and right to the appropriate stakeholders outlined in the notice of motion here tonight, and say, I am, they are, and we are Australian. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Gilligan. Councillors, any other comment on this notice of motion? Councillor Hooper.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Look, it's pushing 9 o'clock, so I'm going to keep my points rather brief. This notice of motion discusses the changes announced on April 20, 2017 by the federal government on becoming an Australian citizen. As Councillor Gilligan has noted, although it is a federal issue, the sheer number of residents in Wyndham that are new to our shores means these changes will impact a significant number of people calling our city home. The rationale of the motion includes the following point. If any legislation proceeds, council is of the strong view it must not be retrospective. This specific point is, in my view, quite important. Now, I'm not across the rationale behind the changes proposed. It is noted that the proposed changes do have an effective date, though, of that 20th of April. Therefore, it is likely to impact, at this point in time, our local permanent residents, not yet Aussies. This change could very well have a negative impact on locals, their families and their future. From the citizenship ceremonies we administer, which are many, we see many of our neighbours have made this country their home. And the joy in their faces when they become an Australian citizen is something to behold. It really is a sight that warms the heart. So for these people, I think that we need to consider these changes as potentially unfair. And I'm not in a position to discuss the merits of the original motion and the point A of that original motion. But the retrospective nature of it was just not fair. So for those people living here, already on the journey to become an Australian, it's just pulling the rug out from under them. And how is that a fair go? So on this point now, as it stands, I'll be putting my support behind that motion, which is seeking clarification on the rationale and saying to the people already here, we think you should have the same rules and regulation as you did before a rudimentary change to the legislation was announced without any warning or prior notice. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Hooper. Councillors, any other? Councillor McElhaney.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Look, I'd just like to say I think it's a little premature at this point to form a position on this issue at this time. The federal government's proposal around changes to citizenship and permanent residency has been announced via the media with no specific details provided to this council. And I note Councillor Gilligan's motion also states that council doesn't have sufficient information to support these changes at this time. It is also important to note that whilst council can play an advocacy role for issues that affect our residents, our resources, and I repeat, our resources are best allocated where we have full details of proposals, and two, that we have consultation with residents that has occurred. All councillors share the intent to provide support and assistance to all residents across a range of issues, and we will continue to play this role regardless of whether this notice of motion is successful. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor McElhaney. Councillor Shaw.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I am also speaking against this motion tonight. I do take seriously Council's role to stick up for the community when legislative changes might have negative impacts to our community. I actually will continue to do this if and when needed, but until we have the detail, I believe council resources should be allocated to priorities where we know we can make a positive difference rather than areas that are uncertain. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Shaw.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor.
Marcus. Okay.
I really strongly oppose this notice of motion put before this council today. This is not a council issue, but a federal government issue, and therefore council should not be putting this motion forward. I, like Councillor Shaw and Councillor McElhaney, think that this is very premature. I have been in touch with the Chief of Staff, and it has only been put out, but if you go onto their website and see exactly how they're explaining everything to the public, which will go before legislation next week, then we might look at it. But as far as I'm concerned, as Councillor McElhaney said, we have many challenges facing us here to make sure that we make this a very safe, fantastic environment to live in. There are still many Italian people out there who have never taken out their citizenship. That when I came last year, I think Councillor Maynard he'd been in here for 37 years, but it made no difference from him. My mother lived here all her life and she never ever became an Australian citizen, but she was free to come and go and do what she likes. So I think we really should look into this a little bit but carefully, but I just strongly disagree, and I don't like some of the wording put into this, the rationale. Wyndham City Council is seriously concerned about these recently announced proposals. How many of our residents out there are concerned about what we are doing? I think they'll be more concerned that really this is none of our business. And from the report I received from the report, the last line from this report says, the government will announce further measures to strengthen the integrity of Australians' migration program and visa systems in the near future. So this is premature, but I strongly oppose ever coming in to do federal positions. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Marcus. Councillors, any other discussion?
I get a right of reply.
You will, as soon as I determine that there's no more discussion. Councillor Khan.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Look, it's my pleasure to support this notice of motion, and there's a rationale behind this. How many of us know what it's like to be a permanent resident? Not born here, been migrated here, and then seeking how to live in this country with the democratic rights. So there's a steps. Now we know that now, and if my fellow councillors who are reading the newspaper, day before yesterday, 2 days ago, there's an article on Ralston citizenship bungles delays Afghan migrants' dreams of representing the Australians in martial art. 16-year-old Rasulullah Sarwasi, resident of Dandenong, and this is all public news, not making up. It's been now, it won't be able to go and represent Australia on the Olympic because he's permanent resident and he's now the new changes will affect his obviously ability to represent Australia. Just one example, my fellow councillor Josh Gilling have just mentioned there's a great family living here, made this Wyndham as a home. Those people who believe this is not our issue, what I consider the community definition is who lives among with us is a community. Local government, state government and federal government will make the community. That's how community get developed. Now the residency changes will impact many residents. Now, as Josh have said that there's about 54,000 people reported here. They are migrated and born here, migrated from other side of the exercising the right to be permanent resident, and now in future obviously is going to be a citizenship. I've spoken with the community and I can speak as being myself as a migrant. If I was not being permanent resident, I would not have opportunity to become Australian citizenship. Now this thing, rather than going for 1 year to going for 4 years, delaying that process, I would not say that this Prime Minister of Australia, Mr. Turnbull, will achieve any positive outcome. A delaying process, it would not achieve any outcome because the permanent resident paying taxes, the participating society at every level, but what you're holding, your great city, your great resident, those who pay taxes to the local government, state government, federal government, not allowing them to become Australian citizens, not allowing them to have same values as we hold. And that means the voice cannot be heard on such a number of levels. Also though, the number of requirements to work in, for example, somebody's passionate about it, graduate from the university, become permanent resident, now want to represent and fight for Australia. Goes on, protect the borders, but the requirement, there must be Australian citizens. The delay will cause a delay for those people who have a passion about it. So this is important now, what citizenship change is going. And just not that, I think Josh Gilligan have not mentioned, citizenship changes just not wouldn't have the time delay. There will be an English test. As Heather Marcus have said that, there are many Italians comes here and they lived here in this great city of Wyndham. They never applied to become Australian citizens. Of course, it's their choice. Now, but they're all eligible if they want to apply because they have lived more than 1 year in previous rules and now they've completed 4 years. My wife is Australian. My wife is permanent resident of Australia, but not Australian citizen. I know she have completed more than 4 years, so she can apply for it. But I know my other relatives and other community members who are really frightened about these changes. I don't believe there's got any logic to delay the permanent residency. Sorry, the delay is the citizenship. It will achieve any positive outcome. I think it will delay the patriotism. People like to be a citizen. People like to represent, working for government, working for local government or state government. And this is important. I think it's actually attack on the democratic values because you're holding people's values behind. I think Australia needs to move forward, and moving forward is being united, being teamwork, and can be achieved giving people opportunity. There are many residents come from China, India, other part of the world. They spend a lot of money.
I don't want to gag you, but you're a minute and a half over your 3 minutes. I've been very, very patient with the
Thank you,
time.
Mr. Mayor. This will also impact China. Has been a great partner. There's many Chinese coming here, and Australians government allow them to buy property and buy investment and allow them to get permanent residency, and that leads to the citizenship. Now that confidence has been driven by economy, and this is all.
Point of order,
I think,
Mr. Mayor.
I think you missed my point, Councillor Khan, that I've been quite lenient in allowing you 50% more time to speak, 50% more time, not 30 seconds, but a minute and a half, and I'm going to give you 5 seconds to wind up.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Not a problem. Look, I think as you've been a great portfolio holder of cultural diversity, we look forward to see your support to support that values we hold, support the permanent residents should have same right as I have and you
5
have.
seconds are up. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, reminding my time. We'll look forward to seeing your support on that thing which is permanent leading to the citizenship, because we like to see the people.
Don't preempt the way I'm going to vote. Thank you, Councillor Khan.
Well, I now complete my thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Gilligan, right of reply unless somebody else wants to speak. Councillor Gonzalo, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I came to Australia with my family 31 years ago as a skilled migrant and has been involved in called issues for almost all those years. I was one of the organizers of the Association of Skilled Migrants in Australia and was a member of the Regional Advisory Council of the Victorian Multicultural Commission. And in Wyndham, I was chair of the Ethnic Communities Council of Werribee. I also organized the Migrant Hub to support asylum seekers and migrants and migrant population in general. I was Citizen of the Year in 2015. In other words, I understand the implication of this change in the minimum number of years that migrants have to wait in order to become citizens. I support the motion of Councillor Josh Gilligan, and I thank him for seeking to address the concerns of many members of our diverse community.
Thank you, Councillor Villagonzalo. Councillors, any other comment? If not, 3-minute
Thank you
reply.
very much.
Thank you, Councillor Gill.
Yeah, I just want to correct the record of Councillor McElhinney and Councillor Marcus because I believe the comments that they've made have been slightly misleading. A briefing paper was provided to each and every councillor in relation to information that I had sought from the department, and I will now quote the information that were provided to these two councillors as well as all others. As you are aware, the Australian Government announced changes to strengthen the requirement to become an Australian citizen. 6 measures were introduced on the 20th of April 2017 and will apply from this date. We have been given information that says it will apply from this date. Permanent residents in this city will need to wait a further 3 years from this date. We have incontrovertible evidence from the department, the Associate Director, saying it will start from this date, and it is important that a vote is not cast on the basis of a belief that this does not impact residents from the 20th. It does, it will, and it impacts thousands. The second point I'd like to make is in relation to the argument that we should not make decisions on within a federal sphere. Well, I would note that dozens and dozens of councils have made a decision on issues such as marriage equality to endorse those issues as a matter of social justice because they believed that it impacted on members of their community. And I would never attack that sort of proposition, but if we do believe that federal issues such as those should never be introduced, then we do question the modern purpose of local government, particularly around social justice. The final point I would also make is that the Youth Justice Facility is an example of state government planning issues. And we made a decision, a very conscious one, because we believed the community was going to be impacted, and we intervened on a state government level and we worked hard to encourage the state government to change their mind. And all I am asking in this notice of motion tonight is for us to write to the federal government to get them to change their minds. This is a consultation period, and asking and writing to the Prime Minister, the Minister of Immigration and Border Protection and the local federal members saying, please consider the impacts on this community. It's not a hard ask, and I understand it is within the realm of a federal issue, but as outlined on the basis of the incontrovertible data, we should act, and act we must. And that's the final point I'll make before people cast their vote. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Gilligan. Councillors, with no further debate, I'm going to put the motion. All those in favour of the motion, put your hands up, please. All those against? Okay, the motion is carried.
Mr. Mayor, can I have the call for division?
You can certainly do that. Let's do it again. All those in favour? Against? Oh, call out the names. Okay, we have got Councillor Villagonzalo, Gilligan and Councillor Gibbons, and we've got Councillor Khan, Hooper and Aaron Arn. Councillor Arn. The rest are all against. Oh, I need to name them again. Okay. Maynard, McElhinney, Marcus, Shaw and Barlow. Okay, councillors, we move on to the next item. Council Seal, Contract Award, Mowing Sports Fields. Councillors, that recommendation is on page 113, and I'm looking for a mover. Councillor Hooper. Seconder, Councillor Gilligan. Councillors, any discussion on the contract for mowing sports fields? No? I shall put the motion. All those in favour? Let me just get this right. There are 2 councillors leaving the chamber, so there are 9 voting. So we'll put that again. All those in favour? Okay. Carried. We now have councillors' delegate reports with a recommendation on page 119. Oh, hang on. Where have I got that? Oh, yes, sorry. Didn't read it. It's questions with notice from the public gallery. Oh, item 9, contract summaries. Neil. Item 10, questions with notice from the public gallery. We have 3 questions, Mr. Mayor. 3 questions. Thank you.
The first question is from Richard Hawkey. Is Richard in the gallery? Thank you, Richard. Your question is, a few years ago there was talk from Council about putting a shared user path on the north side of K Road between Duncan's Road and the Mansion entrance. What, if anything, has happened in the meantime? I'd like to ask Kate Roffey, our Director of Economy, Innovation and Livability, to answer that, if she could, please.
Thank you, Madam CEO, for the evening. Thank you, Richard, for another question on our cycling infrastructure here. So over the past couple of years, Council's been working closely with Vic Roads and the Tourism Precinct on the provision of that shared path that you spoke about on the west side of K Road, and we have in fact done a detailed design which has been completed. The question you asked about the continuity of the shared path over the Duncan's Road freeway overpass is an issue because there isn't enough room at this point in time to allow for a shared path that will let it link up with the Federation Trail on the north side. So that's caused a delay on the K Road shared path. As you're aware, the state government has recently announced a $1.2 billion road investment project as part of their OSAR, Outer Suburban Arterial Road Project announcement, and one of those roads that is due to be upgraded is the Duncan's Road area and the interchange in particular, and we are hoping that when that interchange is upgraded, the shared path across the overcast can be built. Please note it is a state government project, it's not a council project, so we're in their hands timing-wise. But they are due to be done sometime within the next 4 years, and we'll continue to work with Vic Roads on that particular issue as part of the OSAR package.
Thank you, Kate. I have a question here from Lisa Heinrich. Hi, Lisa. The question is, would Council support an application to have the 2 former Council buildings and the current building listed as a precinct with Heritage Victoria? The buildings are not unique enough to be individually listed, but as a precinct of 3 buildings they are. Thanks, Lisa. I'll have to answer that question as well. So in terms of whether or not Council would support an application, I'd have to say until some recommendations brought before the Chamber, it's not known what Council would or would not support, but I'm more than happy to take that proposal back through to staff in the organisation and just have a look at the process of what needs to happen to have that occur, or if not, and we'll be able to provide some feedback to you. And the last question, Mr. Mayor, is a question from Bill Strong. So Bill's still here in front there. The question is, when will something be done by Council to rectify the dangerous traffic congestion at the intersection of Princess Highway and Wattle Avenue in Werribee? This problem will become worse after the proposed 3-level office block is erected next to this intersection. approved by Planning Permit WYP 8977/16. So if I could pass that question to Stephen Thorpe, our Director of City Operations.
Thank you, through you, Mr Mayor. Thank you for the question. The Princess Highway and intersection with Wattle Avenue is actually the responsibility of Vic Roads as the responsible manager for that road. At this stage, I'm not aware of any plans that they have for any alterations to that intersection. In relation to the issue of the planned office building on one of the corners of that intersection and its potential impact on traffic, it has been referred to Council's traffic engineers and also to Vic Roads as the road manager. And whilst I understand your concerns, Mr Strong, about traffic, the traffic engineers from Council and Vic Roads have considered the traffic impacts of that development and consented to the application.
Thanks, Steve. Mr Mayor, can I seek some advice? Councillor Shaw would like to
leave from the chair if granted.
We're going to go back a question. Councillor Shaw's asked leave to ask a question. Is it
I just wanted to see if it was appropriate for Kate Roffey to actually add to that question in relation to the work that I've spoken to Kate Roffey about with the Vic Roads and the Princess Highway Wattle Avenue intersection and the work that is going to be done to see if we can actually do a small fix to that in the short term.
Thank you, Councillor Shaw. As my colleague, Mr Thorpe, has pointed out, it is a Vic Roads road. It's a declared road, so it's not a road that Council has any right to actually do anything with. We have asked Vic Roads about these intersections under their current guidelines. They don't meet their requirements for priority work. They are not, in their terminology, areas that attract an undue number of accidents or incidents, and they don't believe that the queuing or the traffic flows in those areas are excessive. We as Council ourselves, members of my team, are going to undertake some survey work to see what those actual queuing times do realistically look like and how they compare across the municipality. Once we have that information, we can then either determine to make a case back to Vic Roads to have something further done. But again, it seems like a fairly simple thing to do something there, but these are not council roads, so we're not entitled to actually go about a process of doing any works ourselves. It has to be done through Vic Roads.
Okay, thank you. We're now, councillors, we're going to delegates' reports, 11.1, with the recommendation on page 119. Do we have a mover? Councillor Gilligan. A seconder? Councillor Hooper. Okay, councillors, debate? Comment?
Yeah, if I can, just with your indulgence, Mr Mayor, I just wanted to add to my delegates' report and confirm that we have actually established the Youth Committee, and that meets tomorrow night, and that'll be a fantastic opportunity for some of Wyndham's best and brightest to come along and engage from a wide spectrum of our youth community. So a very good step forward. Thank you.
Good. Glad to hear it. Any other comments from delegates? So, Councillor Maynard.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. This council last term decided to take on portfolios, and I am pleased to see this occur again. More specifically, I'm more than happy to be chair of the sports development portfolio, and suffice to say that we've had our first meeting as of the 13th of April, and it was quite a robust and constructive meeting. I think I'd just like to highlight the fact that the purpose of the Sports Development Portfolio Committee is to provide high-level strategic input into topics relating to the portfolio area as identified in the annual portfolio work plan, and in essence, Mr Mayor, to provide advice and feedback and recommendations to Council on a strategic level. Thank you, Mr Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Maynard. Councillor Marcus.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I was very delighted to take over the environmental portfolio from former Councillor Peter Gibbons. And we have a clear vision of what we want to do throughout this next 4 years on working in our environment. And so there's only 4 items that we will be concentrating on because we want to make sure we get results of what we're trying to do. I would like to say that 37 or 39 people applied to go onto the Environment Committee, which was fantastic, but it was very difficult because all of these people had very high qualifications. And we, of course, couldn't take them all, but we will be using all those that didn't make the committee, throughout the 4 years, because we don't want to lose any of their expertise. Of course, our Wyndham overview, the state of the environment, is number 1. The overview of environment and water, department and current strategic workshop on the draft portfolio committee work plan, and of course, litter and waste management is a very strong one. And again, as I said before, we will be looking into the animal that comes under environment as well, because but that's all we want to get doing, because we want to make sure that we get the results that this committee are looking for over the next 4 years. So I'm just very proud to be part of that and welcome all of our new people that have come on board to work on the committee, on the Environment Committee. Thank you, Mr Mayor.
Right, thank you, Councillor Marcus. Councillors, is there any other discussion on that item? If there's not, I shall put the motion. All those in favour? Against? It's carried. We now move on to urgent business, Madam CEO.
There's no urgent.
No?
No urgent business, Mr Mayor.
Councillor Maynard, we're into confidential business.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Following motion, the pursuant to section 89(2) of the Local Government Act 1989, standing orders be suspended
I declare this meeting closed at 9:13. Oh, it's got 13 on the computer.
Okay.
13 p.m. Thank you all. Our longest meeting. Wasn't that good? Ah, mate, you should have been on the old councils then. You would have been.
I don't have that endurance.
Yeah. Councillors, can we remember that we're just having a